Folks, we have been talking about $1 trillion in commercial debt that is up to be refinanced. It is coming and coming quick. We should start talking about what the heck you could do to help facilitate the process of refinancing those loans. Anna and I have some of these, so let's talk about it. What's going on, Anna?
Great. Well, I thought this would be a really good topic for today because it's something that's top of mind for me and a lot of my coaching students and a lot of my other investor friends that play in commercial. And when we say commercial, I don't want you to tune out if you're a residential investor, because what I really mean is how the lender categorizes your deal, not the size of the deal. So some people think, oh, commercial real estate is anything that's 10 units or higher. But the reality is most investors' properties are considered commercial in terms of the lending that you can get on those things. So if you have a single family home that's in an LLC, or you're not going to live in it, and you go to a local bank and you say, hey, I'd like to get a loan on this investment property, they're going to send you to their commercial loan department because it's a non-owner occupied investment. And so when I talk about commercial loans, this is what I'm really thinking about. So that applies to you if you are an investor of a single family home, of a duplex, a quad, a 10 unit, all the way up to, hundreds of units of properties. And so, we have had this mantra back in 23, 24, survive to 25. If you can just get your lender to let you hold on and keep making your mortgage payment, even if the interest rate's higher and you're technically in violation of loan covenants, then you can save your property and not lose it, right? And maybe you can keep your interest rate where it is, get the lender to extend. It's kind of known in a negative way as extend and pretend, but we've all been trying to talk to our lenders. Hopefully you've talked to your lenders by now if you have an issue with a loan that's going to reset and you've said, hey, my loan interest rate is about to go up. And in advance, before the day that your rate resets, you call the lender and say, hey, when this happens, what options do I have? And some lenders are not going to give you very many options because they don't think outside of the box. But our job as investors is really always to be creative. And creative financing can really make you a ton of money. And it can get you in a lot of trouble when things go the other way, as a lot of us are seeing today. But you can make as much money, as much cash flow, and as much of a return by strategically packaging your financing in a way that makes sense for you versus what the lender's going to tell you that they're willing to do. And so when you're purchasing, I've done this so many times, I ask a lender, well, would you be willing to make this exception? Like, would you consider interest only payments for a couple of years so I can juice my cash flow while I'm renovating units? And I'll, pay you whatever fee to be able to do that. Pay a little bit higher interest rate to be able to do that, for example. Or, hey, instead of me putting 20% down, I've got, $200,000 in equity on this other property. Would you just put a second mortgage for the 20% on that other property so I can get in it with no money down? And surprise, surprise, when lending is good and money is plentiful and the economy is smooth, lenders are willing to do these kind of things to help you out because they want your business and they want your deposits, right? They don't want to just give you a loan. They want your deposits. So you have to use that same creativity even when the economy isn't great. And if you don't ask, you won't get. So the high level of this is get creative and think outside the box. Too many investors today, I know, Michael, are panicking and they're calling me. What do I do? Because their interest rate is about to go up. And when I say go up, we're not talking about a little bit. I'll give you some examples from my own portfolio. The things that I own alone that I don't have partners with, for example. I have many loans that were 3.9 to 4% commercial. These are not my, my vacation rental loans are like 2s and 3s. I got really, really blessed with those, right? But the commercial stuff, what they typically do is the lenders will not lock you in for a 20 or 30-year fixed term. Instead, as you guys know, if you use local banks, they'll say, hey, we'll amortize it over 20. Maybe you can ask for an exception and get a 25 or 30-year amortization, but they lock your rate in for a fixed period of time. And after that period of time, the rate resets at a base benchmark, if you will. And then it resets either every year after that or every month after that. So most of those loans are 5 years. Some people get a better rate if they lock in for 3. Some people get a higher rate, but they can lock in for 7. And back in the COVID funny times, you could even lock in for 10 years and pay, half a point more, 3/4 of a point more to get a really long rate lock. But for those of us that didn't pay more to get a longer rate lock, a lot of you are coming up for renewals. And the reason I know that, other than just all the people that we've talked to every day, Michael, is the fact that when rates dropped to historic lows post-COVID, 2020, 2021, this is when most smart investors said, hey, let's pay a modification fee and get my lender to lock in a new 5-year term sub 4. And that's what I did, and lots of other people did. And I underestimated how long rates could go up if we had inflation and stay there. And so I only locked for 5 years for a few that now I'm kicking myself. Wish I had paid an extra 1/4 point and locked for 7, or an extra 1/2 point and locked for 10. But I didn't, right? We don't have a crystal ball. And so you just have to figure out what's going to happen. So for example, I have several that have gone from 3.99 or 4% that have already jumped to 7.5. Okay.
Ouch.
And that's a really good benchmark. I mean, right now, prime is at 7%. And most really good credit commercial loans are priced at about prime +1. So you're looking at most investors today at about 8% if you're a prime investor. Good credit, good income. I have a few that were prime +1/4, which were really, really good. So they're a little bit less, but let's just say 7.5%. So I did the math on a few of these and I said, wow, I'm going to have on just a few properties where my rates are resetting starting last month, this month, and then I have a few one in December and a few into early to mid to late next year. I've got to figure out what's my payment going to jump to. And I projected this out a couple of years ago, but I keep updating it depending on what the Fed's dot plot says it's going to be, just to say what's going to happen. And I was looking at just a handful of mortgages where my mortgage payment was going to jump, Michael, almost $10,000 a month. So that's $120,000 a year less cash flow that I'm going to have coming in if the Fed doesn't drop rates, or depending on the loan benchmark, Treasury rates do not fall. And those are two different things. And Fed could cut rates and Treasuries could go up and my interest rate could go up even higher, right? So what I did is, and I encourage all of you to do, is if you haven't done it, figure out, go to a mortgage calculator, a mortgage amortization calculator, figure out if the rate is this, what's my new payment going to be? And just to be conservative, put in 7.5%. Because if prime drops 50 basis points, you go to 6.5 prime in December, that would be a really good case. You might be at 7.5. You recast that payment out and for however many years you have left, and that's what the bank's payment's going to be. And then you got to go, okay, can I absorb $10,000 a month loss? Thank God, because I have a lot of other real estate, I can absorb that loss, but I don't like it. I don't.
It's not fun.
What else could I do with that $10,000 a month? That's directly going to hit my family's, income and our vacation fund and all these other things. But for many people, if you have 1 or 2 properties and you have a big jump, it happens pretty fast. And so I started to think, what could I do to change this? So the first thing you want to do is get creative and call your lender. And I want you to write down a couple of these things and call your lender and ask, hey, would you consider this? I have a rate resetting. They might go, well, why do you want to do this? And what I told my lender, because I called one of my lenders, a small local bank, we have a great relationship. And I said, I've got a couple of loans with you that the payment's going to go up a couple $1,000s a month. And I really care more about cash flow than I do mortgage pay down, because this is a cash flowing investment for me. And that, he asked that first, well, why do you want to lower your payment? I said, because I don't care about, paying down the value of the property, because my debt to income ratio, my loan to value, on those properties was pretty low. So, I have quite a bit of equity in these properties. And I said, I can maintain the loan covenants. It's not like the value's underwater, but I like cash flow, and I'd rather have a little bit of a balloon payment at the end and have better cash flow than I would my payment going up. What can you do for me? And so I asked first, I'm always going to ask for what I really want, and that's an interest only payment. Now, some of you are going to go, but Anna, you're not paying down the principal. But in a cash flowing investment, I don't care. And again, you can either care about income or appreciation or asset preservation. It's a combo of those three. And at any point in time in your investing career, or in the economy, one of those is going to be more important. I would argue right now for every investor, asset preservation, not losing the asset to the bank, and then income, keeping cash flow are way more important than future appreciation, which we may or may not get for some time. And so I said, can I have an interest only period for another 2 years? The answer first was no, we won't do that. We don't like interest only. We want you to pay something, but let me see what we can do. So I said, okay, what about a fixed period where I extend the fixed period, but to a different benchmark? So instead of prime plus one, Michael, I'm like, is there a different benchmark that we can switch to that would let me lock in for 3 years or for 5 years? And they said yes. And they came back to me and said, hey, we can buy a 3-year treasury or a 5-year treasury, or based on the Fed funds rate, we can borrow. And this is what your new payment would be for a 3-year lock and a 5-year lock. The beauty of this, Michael, is that if you do a rate lock like this, where you're just locking in your term, but you do it for a shorter period of time, a 3 or 5 year time, and you've already had that loan for a few years, your bank is really not losing money on that, and they'll charge you a small modification fee. So for a very small fee on the size of, I'll give you one of my loans that's an example, a $700,000 loan. I'm going to pay about $1,500 to modify the loan to lock in for another 3 or 5 years.
Oh, that's not bad.
What is the beauty of that 3 and 5 year lock is it's not based on the prime plus one. It's based on the Fed funds rate. Okay. So the interest rate that I'm being quoted today is 1.5% to 2% less than prime plus one.
Nice.
A whole lot better. So I'm looking at like 6.5 to 7 instead of 7.5 to 8. And
that's real money on 700K.
It's real money, and they're going to still amortize it. So then I said, can you amortize it longer and give me a balloon at the end? So I have a 25-year loan. Okay. That was an exception because they only used to do 20. They're going to let me keep a 25-year amortization to keep that payment lower with that lower rate. And then I'll have a balloon at the end of the 20-year loan, which I really don't care about because my property is going to go up in value and all of that. But what I figured out was that by doing that 25-year am at that rate, I'm going to save that payment would have gone up about, I want to say it's like $1,900 for that one loan. And it's only going to go up like $200. That's $1,700 in my pocket that I was about to lose, Michael, because my interest rate was going to go up. And so it's that kind of out of the box thinking that don't just assume my lender's going to raise my rate. I'm screwed. I messed up. What do I do? You go ask the lender to modify. And the other beauty is I don't have to go refi, right? I don't have to go to another lender and pay points and pay for a new appraisal and hope that the appraisal comes in good, because on some commercial properties, the appraisals are not going to be what I bought them for. That's just the reality. I can just continue a relationship with a bank who wants my business, wants my deposits, and they're happy to help me out and have a performing loan that we have just legally modified. And so that is the first strategy that I would encourage y'all to think about. And the beauty of that is it saves me so much cash flow. If I want to, Michael, I can still make extra payments to further reduce the actual interest I'm paying on that principal. If you just took the difference in payment and tacked it on to the end every month, if you wanted to, you could rapidly accelerate and reduce the total interest you're paying. But it's just a strategy that can really help you. And if you have a lot of properties, it saves you so much time and money from trying to refi away. And it really can get you a really good payment. Now, the last thing on this, and then I'll open it up for you to ask me questions, right, on your show.
I love it.
Is, I said, hey, since your benchmark, because the next question is what benchmark do you use? And that's a big, important factor because, prime is based on Fed funds rate, usually plus about 3%. And you got a spread on that. But they said, no, we actually use the Fed funds rate. So I said, okay, the Fed's meeting in December 9th and 10th. I believe they're going to cut at least a quarter, maybe a half, even though 50% of the market says they may hold still. I think they're going to cut at least a quarter. And I think labor's deteriorating enough that we could still have a half. So I'm betting that I can get that 6.99 and 6.49 options for 3 or 5 year fixed down to 6.25 to 6.75, maybe
Hmm.
even as good as 6 and 6.5. So I'm going to wait a month. I'm going to see where the rates are on the 10th. And then the lender and I are going to lock in either the 3 or 5 and save that
Nice.
much money. And over 4 loans alone, I will offset about $8,500 of that $10,000 a month
Woo.
increase that I thought I was going to have to pay because my rates were resetting.
That's worth some phone calls right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you done this with your lenders, or have you
Yeah,
tried?
I don't. Thankfully, all of our big loans, even commercial loans, we put DSCR 30-year fixed on. So we have loans at 3.99, thanks to Velocity Mortgage. Back in 21 or 22, that we got lucky. We
Let
got
me ask
30-year
you
debt.
this though, Michael.
Mhm.
I haven't found any DSCR lenders that'll do anything over a 5 or an 8 unit. Are these all properties that are like 5 to 8
No,
units?
these are no. He does. He does apartments. I think up to $5 million is his cutoff.
Where he'll do the DSCR unlock for 30 years.
That's all
Wow,
he
I need
does
to
is
call your
30-year fixed.
Velocity guy.
Yeah, well, they're not
It's not-
3.99 anymore. That was a very
Yeah,
unique time in
yeah,
history.
exactly. And most of these DSCRs are done by funds, but a lot of the
Sure.
funds they were doing 8 units and then they backed off to only 5. And so most larger commercial buildings over that 8 unit,
No,
you
we got an
can't find
18 with him.
DSCR
Yeah,
loans.
we got an 18, a 13, or 12. Yeah. Yeah, no,
Awesome.
we another thing we got right on timing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
But when I think about the commercial avalanche that is coming, I'm looking through it for opportunity, frankly,
Yeah.
because so if we just look at it as a pie, right?
Yeah.
And the $1 trillion, whatever the number is, there's going to be a portion of operators like you who have the reputation, the cash flow, the history, that they're going to be able to do what you did, right? Work with the bank. The payment will go up, but it won't be 10 grand. It'll be 2 grand.
Yep.
So that part of the pie will move on with the existing owner and be totally fine.
Yep.
Let's call that. I can't imagine that's bigger than 30%. So I think 30% gone. Then there's, another portion of this where the operator is not a good operator, right? They're maybe naive or new or whatever, and they got in with the wave, and they're already trying to get out, right? They're already trying to sell. And, unfortunately for those folks, probably the best case is just the equity's gone, right? The loan is going to be paid back. So I think there's a big portion of that. And then it's the other 50%. I'm like, I don't know what happens. Do they just do another extend and pretend? Because some of these banks don't want the asset back. And, there's going to be opportunity in this $1 trillion. I just don't know how big the opportunity is going to be.
Absolutely. And a lot of it, depends on credit. So, this kind of goes back to the show that we did 2 weeks ago, and I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially regional banks that hold, I've read stats up to 83, 86% of commercial loans,
me too.
right? Multifamily is generally, a lot of them are done with Fannie and Freddie. So you have the benefit of fixed rate loans, for 10 years or so with multifamily. But when any other kind of a commercial or small balance multifamily, something less than $1 million, they're usually with regional banks. And a lot of times the bigger ones, we have bigger ones that we chose a regional bank over Fannie Freddie because the headaches of owning them are so much lower. I don't have to submit quarterly financials and all this stuff with the local bank. But all these local banks are getting tight. And as they have been having distress in their commercial loans for about 3 years at this point, where they have done the extend and pretend, but the bank regulators really are coming in and looking and going, hey, you've had these loans that they're probably not worth what the loan is today. Their LTV is
time to mark to market. Yep.
And their debt coverage ratio isn't working. You extended long enough. It looks like the Fed isn't going to cut rates. You're going to have to do something and mark to market. So that means they have to say, hey, this property that was worth 10 million that we lent 7.5 on is now worth 6. So we're upside down. If the bank has to write off too many of those loans, they can become insolvent, where their assets, that our loan, our liability is the bank's assets. So that's what caused some of these banks to fail. And it's what caused the savings and loan crisis of the 80s after a kind of similar period with high inflation and commercial values going down. So banks don't want to have to write off those loans. So I think that they will, as long as the regulators allow it, they will continue to try to work with a lot of borrowers. But to your point, if they're upside down and they're not cash flowing because their taxes and insurance went up, they couldn't force rents the way that they wanted. That's really where there's big opportunities, because the banks will foreclose on
Oh, yeah,
those
absolutely.
properties because they know that they're basically already dead and they can't squeeze blood out of a dead turnip,
Yeah, and again, I've been through this movie before,
Yeah.
and there's a set, right? Again, if we go back to that pie, I'm going to guess it's at least 25% where there's going to be real opportunity.
Yeah.
But you've got to have a stomach to take these on, because what happens with those
Absolutely.
current owners who are going to lose them is they stop all maintenance. They stop everything.
Right.
And this asset just goes, down in quality. Again, one of the buildings we bought in the last crisis, we bought for half off.
Yeah.
Right. But it took almost 18 months to completely turn it around.
Absolutely. And I do think, I think in the much larger space, there's a lot more opportunity to buy properties, for pretty cheap today. I think in the smaller properties, a lot of owners have had so much equity growth in the last 5 years that their loan to value isn't anywhere near as hit as these large properties, especially if you have, something less than a 10 unit, a 4 unit, a 5 unit. They've gone up in value quite a bit without that 30% haircut, because they're not tied, the lending to buy them is not tied to those treasury bond rates. And so I think there's going to be less opportunity on the small properties, other than landlords that are like, this is too much of a headache, or maybe they want to sell it to take that equity so that they can cover their margin calls in the stock market, or they can just, say, I'm out, I have enough equity, let me go retire into the sunset. So there's definitely opportunity. You always have to look. And I think my one of my takeaways is the better you are in your cash flow position on the properties you already own, the more likely you're going to be able to take advantage of these properties and even ask the lender. When I talk to my lenders, I don't go, I'm not going to be able to make this mortgage payment. The last thing I want to do is make them think I'm going to be distressed. And thankfully I'm not, although in 2009, I was in that distressed situation.
Absolutely.
Today, I'm not in that. But what you want to do is you want to show them you're thinking intelligently and you're a solution maker, not another problem that they have. So me calling my lender and say, I'd like to make a modification because I want more cash flow, because I want to be able to go buy more property. Then I say, oh, by the way, once I get this modification done, by the way, thank you for this. This has given me the opportunity to save on cash flow. And I've got this much money set aside and I'm looking to go buy. And if I can buy something, if you have to write off an asset from your books, or you have another loan on your books that you're the lender on, that they are upside down and they need a more professional owner to come in and turn this thing around, I'm happy to look at buying that from you and then using you for the mortgage and bringing you more deposits. And so that is how you get off market properties that are distressed, that the lender does take back, that they really don't want to advertise out there too long. They don't want to have to spend the money to, put it with an agent. If you can get on their list as a legitimate buyer, and you show themselves that, like, this is a wise investor who's positioning themselves well with cash flow, they've got equity, and they're getting ready to buy, they're going to think of you as the solution to some of the problems that they have with other assets that are defaulting. And then you don't have the competition. So it's really important, to have a great relationship with your local lenders. That's I think the biggest takeaway, because when
don't hide.
When you want to buy, or when you want to change your financial position on an asset, it's that relationship with that lender that's really gonna help you. The other thing I'll just throw out there real quick is the old sell high, buy low, right? We all want to buy low, but we don't often think about how we can tap the equity gains that we've already grown. I mean, we are in an everything bubble, an asset bubble. If you own Bitcoin, although it's coming down a little bit, over the last couple of days, if you own gold, if you own silver, and you have things of value that you think are near a top, it might be worth it to go ahead and sell it, capture that appreciation, and use that appreciation to pay down some of your mortgages. And that's one of the other strategies that I just did, Michael, that might benefit some people to think about. I normally would not have done this. When interest rates are low, I want loans. I want to leverage as much as I can, because I have positive leverage where the more money I borrow, the higher my cash on cash return on my down payment versus paying cash. But when interest rates get to a certain level, and it's usually about 6% historically, when they get to 6% or higher, you're usually in a negative leverage or break even position. So borrowing more doesn't really help you buy more assets than paying cash, and it doesn't boost your cash on cash return. So with rates today, and let's say this, call it 7.5 to 8. If you have loans that you're jumping and you're paying 7.5 to 8, you're usually going to be in a negative leverage situation. And so paying down that debt when inflation is less than that, inflation, let's just call it 3 to 5, right? It's less than 7 to 8 in most things, right? It might make sense to actually pay down some mortgages. And so I sold some silver last week. I sold it on one of the highest days historically. I think maybe the second highest day historically.
Nice.
Sold a bunch, made some really good gains on that. And I chose to pay off 3 really small mortgages. They were like totaled about 120,000 with the gains that I made on my silver. And so by paying off those 3, I'm saving $1,425 a month in payments. So that increases my cash flow $1,425 to help offset some of the increases in some of my other loans. And yes, I've sold silver, and yes, it could go up in value more, but I don't want to bank on more speculation and FOMO of hoping something goes out. If I can capitalize on it, take my gains and do something to increase my cash flow and my standard of living. So I want to encourage you guys as well to think about, do you have assets that it's time to sell? Maybe it's a single family house that is going to need a new roof, and it's going to need a new HVAC system, and you're going to have to put a bunch of money into it. And really, the amount of money you have on the loan isn't worth it. Maybe you've got equity, you can go pay down another mortgage. And the great thing is, if rates, if and when, because I believe it's just a matter of when, really fall, then I have, something else that I can go with that paid off mortgage, and I can borrow against it again at a much lower interest rate in the future, but boost my cash flow. So hopefully that gives you guys some idea of things that you can do to increase your cash flow, diminish the hit that you're going to take when these interest rates really go, and kind of think outside the box into ways that you can continue to be successful, even if you haven't bought anything or you're not buying anything until you figure out how to stabilize what it is that you already own.
Anna, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing what you're doing in real life. That's amazing. Where can people find you?
Great. You can find me here on your channel, on social media at Anna Kelly REI Mom, and for real estate wealth coaching and consulting, my website, AnnaKellyInvesting.com, will allow you to book an appointment with me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.